Well, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, How to Protect Your Business from Fraud. Before we get to our guest speaker for this afternoon's webinar, my name is Scott Kozak, Director of Learning and Development here at Union Savings Bank, and I will act as the moderator for our webinar. You will be in look and listen only mode for the duration of our webinar, which means we can't hear or see you, but questions are encouraged. If you have any throughout, feel free to log those in chat and we'll pause periodically to field those questions. And lastly, but importantly, there's a brief 4 or 5 question survey at the conclusion. Once we end the webinar, it should pop up in your browser, a link you can click on. Your feedback is important to us, not only about how the topic resonated with you today, but also about future topics you may be interested in learning more about from Union Savings Bank. So with that, it is my privilege and honor to introduce our speaker today, Dianne, who is our VP, Head of Treasury Services here at Union Savings Bank. Dianne.
Hello, thank you for that introduction, Scott. Dianne Gasior here, Head of Treasury Services, Union Savings Bank. I've worked in the cash management world for 17 years, helping commercial businesses, not-for-profits, and municipalities to maximize cash flow, reduce days outstanding, and most importantly, mitigate fraud, which is what we're here today to talk about. As we know, fraud has been on the rise. Union Savings Bank has a suite of services to help protect you from both check and ACH fraud, which we'll discuss further throughout the presentation. For this presentation, I do want to take a little bit of a different approach than the fraud webinars I've attended in the past. I want to start with what your business can do operationally to protect yourself today, even without the services that we can add on with Treasury management, but to start to think about protecting your company in a cultural way, in an operational way, and being able to talk to your employees about this. After 17 years in the business, I've been up close and personal to the effects of fraud and theft throughout the workplace. Unfortunately, this usually happens after the fact. Though many of those experiences were devastating for my clients, I have the vantage point to share some real life scenarios and my advisement to protect your business and your employees and your community overall. Because at the end of the day, businesses, they're here to serve those they employ and with their products and services for their community. So that's really where your focus is. And we have to remember at the bottom line, if you don't have that liquidity, you're not really able to do that. So I want to start by talking about business email compromise. I think we all know enough about business email compromise that you should check the sender. Does that handle in that email make sense? Is there that sense of urgency? Is there a strange link to click? Is the contact person related to the company in some way? We all know how to check those boxes. But what happens if it's already happened and you're unaware that it's happened? I want to talk a little bit about what those fraudsters are doing so that you can better protect yourself, especially from wire fraud, because that really tends to be the type of fraud vehicle people are using for business email compromise. ACH as well, but typically it's wire. So the first thing I want you to think about is if somebody has compromised your business, that means that they're already in your electronic world. So they've been watching what you're doing. They see what your internal approval processes probably look like based on email exchanges. They know what vendors you pay and at what time, and what those invoices look like, and nothing that a Microsoft Word document can't mimic. They're watching your patterns, and at that point, in many cases, they're able to mimic email addresses. So say you typically get approval from the CFO of your company, the CEO, the president of your company to send a wire out. Who's to say that that email address hasn't been mimicked, right? I encourage people that when it comes to these internal approvals or how you have that workflow set, you really start to pick up the phone again, right? I think we all get busy. We're all, on the phone, quick text, quick alerts, which works, as far as efficiency in a business, but protecting fraud, oftentimes I do recommend we start talking to people. If you get an invoice from a vendor, they're calling that vendor up, saying, hey, can you verify this? Can you tell me what the invoice number is? What is the amount? So on and so forth. Because if somebody has falsified that invoice, well, on the other end, when you call a phone number that you trust, not something that was in that email, the phone number of the vendor that you've used on and again, then you know that you're talking to the right person. And they may say, oh, no, no, no. We didn't change our account numbers. And no, no, no. That is not an invoice number that we have on file. Those types of things are things that you can start to build into your business to protect yourself. And as mentioned before, and here on the slide is impersonating that workflow. Is if somebody has already invaded your electronic space, they know the patterns of how things move along with your company. So really trying to take a look at how operationally you are sending funds today, how you receive money today, really scrutinizing that. It's worth your time to keep your capital safe. Scott, do you want to go on to the next slide? Internal theft. Okay, so at this point, I either lose half the room because I offended them, or half the room leans in. So I'm hoping that we're in the half that leans in. So this is an unfortunate reality, is internal theft in a business. I've seen this more times than I can count. It is a very tough thing for businesses to go through. It's rather violating, to say the least. But I want to kind of get into how this happens. We'll take our feelings about it aside, and I want to just kind of give you some real life examples of how I've seen this happen. I will mention that in this space, it tends to be not necessarily your brand new employees. Sometimes it is your longest term employees, the people that you trust the most, that may take a little off the top. But with that said, we don't want to stay in that negative space. I want to talk about how it's done, so you can start to think about how you want to safeguard yourself. So the first is this layering of transactions. What that simply means is a person who is, say, they do your payables, right? They can start to pad certain transactions so that when they do build in a transaction that might go to themselves or to another person that they're basically in cahoots with, to be able to scrape a little off the top, it's not noticed. So padding those transactions, template manipulation. Now this is an interesting one. I'm seeing this more often now than before. And what this is that same person who is like, they say they're sending your ACH file. They're adding vendors to the templates. And some of those vendors might be their own cell phone bill, their car payment, so on and so forth. And you'd be surprised, you think, who would be that bold? But people are that bold, and sometimes a lot of time passes before anybody catches up to it. What we have in place here at Union Savings for this template manipulation to keep this from happening is we have workflows in which one person can build a template, another person has to approve it. Or here is your template, you're not allowed to edit it. If it does need to be edited, you need my approval to do that. I think that is a brilliant checks and balances, and it avoids anything like this happening. And lastly is that sale of confidential information. You have to remember that what some of your accountants have at their fingertips is they not only have your check information and your account information, they also have that of maybe they're doing payroll. They have that of all of your employees. And now it's a terrible business, but a big business to go online and sell that confidential information. So I just want you to be aware of this. I've been to many a fraud webinar, and I feel like this is the piece that not a lot of people talk about because it's uncomfortable to talk about it. But it's okay to look at your organization and say, hey, where can I make more checks and balances? Do I really want the same person who's doing payables to also do receivables? Do I want to split those things up? How do I want that workflow to go? And Scott, if you get to the next slide, we can kind of go deeper into what that looks like. So here I just want to kind of talk about things that you may not have thought about before in your business. I mean, after all, you have many tasks, many hats to wear, and sometimes your banking is not the thing you're thinking, scrutinizing over and the thing you're thinking about all the time. So I want to start with understanding the risks, right? Understanding what it is that what people have access to, what you have access to. Again, like I said, on your check, it has your full account number, your routing number. what bank, what address, all sorts of validating factors. Your check numbers are important because now people know what sequence you're in your check. So it wouldn't take much to think, okay, I want to make a fake check right now. I'm just going to go 30 more numbers deep and it will clear because that check probably hasn't passed yet, right? Also, again, a lot of your employees that are doing your payables have access to account numbers of your vendors, of your other employees, if they're doing payroll, so on and so forth. So, that's really important to assess and to understand what somebody could do with that kind of access, right? Also, with receivables, a lot of people don't think about fraud with receivables and why that's important. And I have an example here of ACH sect codes. I think if any of you on the phone right now originate ACH, you know that in the setup, we ask, are you paying a person? Or are you paying a corporate company? And that's where the two sect codes come in, the CCD and PPD. That's a corporate credit or debit, prearranged payment or deposit, right? Now, I'm sure in your mind you think, okay, well, the bank just wants to know this because they want to, these are trends or maybe this type of transaction, the way that this happens. But truly, it's because the risk on this is with a corporate payment, corporate receivable, that company only has 24 hours to dispute that charge, whereas a person has 60 days. So these are the kind of things that I think are important to unwind and untangle, just to have a little bit more transparency, to understand the why behind electronic payments, the why behind how we catalog things, the why, we assess the risk that we do. And, here at USB, you have myself, you have my whole team, they're advisors, quite frankly. So if you ever have questions about this, nuanced questions, please don't hesitate to give us a ring, call us up, send us an email. We are here to help you with this because the more you understand, the more you could mitigate your risk and the more you could just focus on your business knowing that, your working capital is safe and sound. So the next layer of that is the delegation of duties, which I mentioned with the templates, right? Here at USB, we have the technology where everything can have dual controls, basically. So one person sets up a payment, another person releases it, somebody else has to approve that all. And you can make that workflow as layered as you want, as complicated or as simple as you want. Most approvals here can be done via the mobile app, which is nice. So all the payments are done on your PC, your laptops, but you could do the approvals remotely, which for many organizations it's key because people are on the go, they're going to different locations, they have other responsibilities, site visits, so on and so forth. Our attorneys with their closings, they'll have their paralegals set up all the wires in the morning. We all know sometimes closings don't actually happen. There's a piece of duct tape and a fence somebody's not happy about, but the wire's ready, so you can approve it on site. And with that, also internal audits. This is something every organization has to assess what they have for resources. If maybe you want to just every quarter, take a look at your vendors, take a look at your payables, your receivables, scrutinizing that a bit. Maybe you can only do it biannually or annually. It's worth it. I've had a lot of clients who have transitioned from check to ACH, and they take that time to scrutinize their vendors. Some vendors even give you a discount if you use ACH because things reconcile quicker. So, there are different ways to, either look at segments of your business, types of your vendors, bring them together, and maybe just take a look at how that is going back and forth. Again, we're here to advise you on that, on some approaches that some of my clients have taken to make that succinct and quick. And last but not least, not being afraid to talk to your employees, to point out all the things that you're putting in place for checks and balances, to talk out loud about, okay, we need to come up with a good workflow for this process. We're going to implement these services like positive pay, which I'll talk about next, to mitigate risk in talking about it. Because if you talk about it, everyone knows you're thinking about it. people will be a lot less bold to make a move if they know that you're scrutinizing this. And with that said, something that I've seen time and time again over doing this for almost 2 decades now is if you have people in your finance departments that are resistant to operational change to mitigate fraud, whether that's these kind of changes I'm talking about now, behavioral changes, or service changes, it's a red flag. And it's not fun for me to say that, but I have seen it time and time again where I've gone, talked about positive pay, talked about ways that people can mitigate risk, and there's somebody in the back office very resistant to this. And lo and behold, an owner finds out sometime after that things have not been on the up and up. So again, these are generalizations. This is not for everyone. We have organizations who have entire finance teams. We have organizations that's a one person. And you do have to consider your resources and your time and what that looks like for your organization. We're here to help you figure that out and, kind of make a priority list with you. Take a look at what you have for staff, where you physically are. Can you be at the computer? How does that work? We're here to help you figure all those out because every business has a different nuance when it comes to that. But these are just some things that I think, we should be able to talk about more openly without anyone getting a little offended or feeling scrutinized or under attack. It's just the reality of the world today is we have to be slightly suspicious because people are taking advantage because while you're running your businesses every day, there's a criminal out there and their business is to be a criminal. And that's the reality of the situation. So with that said, I want to go on to more positive things, Scott. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk through some of the services that Union Savings Bank has to mitigate risk, automate a lot of this process. So the first is check positive pay. I do always say the best way to prevent check fraud is to not write checks, but alas, in some cases, we still have to write checks for various reasons. So check positive pay is an automated service. Very simply, it captures your check number, the date, and the dollar amount on your check. If a check is presented that is not on that list, you get an exception. And that exception will say, hey, we don't see this on this list. And you have time in the day to decide on this exception. You have till 1 p.m. and you could say, do not pay. Oh, I did not write that check. Or, oh my goodness, I forgot to put that in the file. I forgot to upload that manually. Yes, please let that check clear. And you have till 1 p.m. to decide that. Now, with that said, you'll notice that I didn't mention the payee information. And as we all know, that is one of the big frauds happening right now is people are stealing mail, they're getting their mitts on checks, and they're changing the payee name. So even if you have classic check positive pay, it's not checking that payee name. That's an additional service throughout the industry. It's been an additional service. If you have an ERP system that you're using now where you download a CSV file, upload it, and that's how you get your check registry into the bank system. We work with you with testing to make sure that this payee information lines up because it's very much a formatting situation. So, we'll work with you if you need to get different kind of check stock, whatever the case may be. Payee information is increasingly important with the ability to check capture. So if you think about this, nowadays people are just taking a picture of a check. It's under $10,000 and they are able to deposit it, move those funds out right away, right? That's where the fraud happens with washing a check. These days, because you're taking a picture, the quality of the check doesn't even matter. It could be on the worst paper. It could practically be like whiteout and then somebody writes their name in it. So this is something to seriously consider at minimum. If you have, the resources to be able to manage this. Now, with that, when I say that is, you will get those exceptions. There has to be a person who's able to decide on those. These can come to you via text, which is helpful. So you could do those approvals via text. But in some of our cases, we have clients who, hey, I'm a one-man show. I have 2 people, or I'm only writing like 5 checks a month. do I really need this entire system and an upload and manually putting them in? You don't. We do have a service that's a softer service in between. And Scott, if you can go to the next slide. So we have something called reverse positive pay. Reverse positive pay, every check comes up as an exception and you decide on every check. Reverse positive pay is not on mobile just yet, so you do have to be on a PC to see these. The default of this is pay. The reason why the default of this is pay is, again, this is for that customer who has lesser resources, might not be able to manage every single day, but this is sort of like belt and suspenders. Like you could go online and look, it will default to pay. However, you can choose for it to reverse. So you can choose it to be like classic positive pay and do not pay, right? For reverse positive pay. This also works for our larger clients who have, a lot of check volume in some accounts, but other accounts, maybe they write a check once every 6 months. So they want to know that having reverse positive pay. When we piloted this, interestingly enough, we had a larger corporate client who had a high volume of checks, but they put reverse positive pay just on accounts that had a few. And funny enough, what they found with this is when checks started presenting on those smaller accounts, they started making administrative changes because for them, it wasn't fraud, but they realized, you know what, that check actually shouldn't be coming out of that account. So it was interesting that they actually took advantage of this service from a administrative standpoint, something I didn't expect. Also during that pilot, one of our smaller businesses did catch a fraudulent check for $7,000. So, that was a two-man shop. And this obviously worked out perfectly for them. And again, if you do not write checks from any of your accounts or just a couple of your accounts, you could always put a check debit block, which just means if anybody made a counterfeit check, it could never be honored because that block is there. So it'll always be rejected. So that is our positive pay suite of services for checks. Scott, if you want to move on to the next one. And we also have ACH positive pay. ACH positive pay is a great service. It's a great service if your account is debited by vendors automatically. The setup for this is really great because it also gives you a chance to review and customize your decisions. So how ACH positive pay works is we set up ACH positive pay and you start getting exceptions for everything that's hitting your account, right? Every, ACH debit that's hitting your account. And what you do is you start to build your own repository. So you say, yes, this company can come and debit me, but only up to this certain amount, only to this frequency, and that's it. So you'll never get an exception for that as long as it falls within the rules that you've set. Now, say all of a sudden one of your vendors comes and debits you, it could just be $20 over that limit that you had put. You'll get an exception. And in some cases, you just needed to make an adjustment. You can do so. And, then you will not get that exception again because maybe their prices went up, maybe the frequency went up, maybe your business as, booming and you needed more materials. And these exception decisions can be made until 6 p.m. And just like check debit block, there's ACH debit block. So if you have accounts, no one should ever come and debit. Alas, you would want to put an ACH debit block, preventing anybody from ever to be able to come and debit your account. Scott, would you move on to the last one? I believe it's the last one. So all in all, those are ways to prevent your current transactions. Those are ways to prevent fraud from your accounts. A great way to mitigate check fraud specifically is, like I said before, not writing checks. We do offer a comprehensive ACH vehicle for making payments. So you can originate your ACH payments. This is really great for payroll. It's really great for your vendors. You could build these templates like I spoke about before. You can use all the controls to build the templates. You can have as many templates as you want. You could have them like maybe per catalog. So, this is what I do for this location, that location, or, even, this is office supplies, this is for my fleet, this is for so on and so forth, payroll. Or you can have them all in one template, and you can manipulate in that template the dollar amount if you so choose. You can have various vendors in one template, but like unclick certain ones because you're not going to be sending a payment then. You can set the payment date in these templates. And what's great about using ACH rather than check is you're not giving somebody a slip of paper with your check number on it where only knows where it ends up. Somebody steals the mail, somebody has it on a desk. You don't know how many roommates somebody has, it could end up anywhere. And also your payments settle quicker, right? You'll always know where you are with your cash position. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what business owners want to know. What is my cash position? How can I shorten my reconciliation? In this yield environment, maybe you want to take that excess liquidity and you want to invest it. If you could forecast your cash, you can leverage that. When you have checks outstanding for how many weeks, how many months, over and over and over again, how do you really know where you stand? I really feel like ACH gives that power back to you so that you can utilize your capital in a different way. So that is sort of my long and short of fraud prevention. Those were lots of words, and I feel like I may have sucked all the oxygen out of my office. So I kind of want to hear from you. If you have questions, concerns, any other details that you might want to add, or maybe you have a circumstance that you want to share with the room that, I didn't cover, or, might just be one of those off scenarios where you're like, this happened to us, or this happened in another business I know, and I think people should know about it.
I'm looking at the question queue right now. It's quiet. We had one come in that I think you addressed already. So again, if you have questions, feel free to log it in chat and we'll make sure to address those before the conclusion.
Okay. Well, these next two slides are, they're a little elementary, but I think that they're helpful. Oftentimes we talk to our clients and we're not necessarily talking to the decision owner. We're talking to an office manager, we're talking to a clerk, we're talking to people who are like maybe the client facing, and they're dealing with the invoices and the POs and all of those things. And when we present positive pay, it can be a little overwhelming because there are the different tiers of the services, right? We did include these two slides, and this first one is, what I'm calling a check fraud vulnerability discovery, right? So it's a decision tree. It's, do I write checks from this account? Yes, I do. And where would you go? Are they infrequent? If they're infrequent or you don't have a high volume, maybe reverse positive pay is good for that particular account. Okay, well, in my other account, I write a lot of checks. So we want to think about check positive pay. Now, do we want to add the payee onto that? And, it's just a decision tree that allows you to, kind of go account by account, because you could have the different services on the different accounts, right? You can have, blocks on one, check positive pay on another. It's just a way for you to kind of start to think through your accounts, where you see the future of that looking like. And the next slide breaks down ACH positive pay. So just a way to look at this so that, if you are somebody who is not the decision maker, but you need to explain this to them because you want this buy-in, because you're like, hey, this would be great. Take one less thing off my plate, that I know that I have these protections, but how do I explain this? Dianne or Luce or Ryan or anybody from my team, they sat down with me for an hour. We went through it, but I don't remember all the nuances. These are really great slides to kind of go through and help you explain to the decision makers and the signers, what it is that we're thinking about and why that is. I hope you find it helpful because I think, it does come across a little elementary, but if you don't know about this or think about this every day, and even our internal people that I know are on the call, this is a really great way to also talk through it with your customers. Just simplifies things a little bit because fraud prevention doesn't work unless it's simple.
Excellent, Diane. Awesome job. I'm looking at the question queue. One of the questions that came in was, it looks like we might have another question coming in. One of the questions was just, knowing whether or not some of these services may or may not be good for a business that is on the call today. By all means, the survey at the end of this will actually have a spot that if you wanted anybody to call back to speak to you specifically about what you can do to help your business, you can actually just leave your contact, because it is an anonymous survey. So you just have to list your name and email address or phone number, and then somebody from Diane's team can reach out to you to work with you on any questions you might have unique to your business. Looks like we have a question. Hi, positive check. Pay question, manual entry. Is payee name automatically part of the service, or is that an extra add-on? I know it says name optional when I fill in the data on the USB site. So in other words, if they include the name, is it automatically part of the verification process is the question. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. You would have to have the payee service checked. It would have to be on. So we would have to add the payee service on top of the regular positive pay.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We will stay on for another minute or two before we conclude here to see if there's any additional questions from our people participating today.
I
Pop
do
up
have
on.
a side note, one of the things that my team offers is right now we're doing a bit of a campaign with positive pay. So pricing is discounted. We do that sort of based on volumes and things. So it's a one-off conversation with clients. But if you're a current client and you want something what we call a fraud vulnerability review, we do that for you. So what we do is we look through your accounts, we look through your business accounts, and we take a look at, okay, this account is writing 20 checks a month. Maybe that's really great for reverse positive pay. This doesn't have any activity. Let's put some blocks on that. Or, you know what, they have positive pay on 3 of their accounts, but they don't have payee positive pay. Maybe we should recommend that. So we actually go through your accounts for you, take a look at your activity, maybe over like a 3-month period of time, not forever and always, right? But like a 3-month period of time. And we make those recommendations. Doesn't mean you have to take it. It just means now you're aware of it and you know what you could do, right? Because, that's part of the relationship. That's part of our responsibility. And so if you're interested in something like that, we can't go ahead and do that for all of our clients right at that same moment. But if you're interested in us doing that, just reach out to us. Again, the survey at the end, but it's Treasury Services at unionsavings.com. That goes to every single person's email in my department. So, feel free, reach out. We'll be happy to, open up the hood, take a look at what you got going on.
Love it. Thank you for that extra plug, Diane. So that brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar. Thank you all for taking time out of your day, especially during your lunch break, to join us. Again, there is a brief, I think a 4-question survey, probably take you all of 2 minutes to complete, but your feedback is very important to us. And certainly if you are looking for one of those services or more information about it, there'll be an opportunity for you to put your name and contact information so we can reach out. So with that, Diane, great job. Thank you for being our speaker this quarter. And we look forward to having you guys on maybe a future topic coming next quarter.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.